Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from around the world. I am delighted to welcome you to our expanded educational programming. I'm Valerie Fletcher. I'm the Executive Director of the Institute for Human-Centered Design, and I'm thrilled to have two old friends today to introduce their work to you. I do want to take a minute, just a couple of minutes actually, to talk about our expanded educational commitment. We have always been about education and design, but we have been distracted and consumed by our consulting and design and research projects for a long time, to the neglect of our educational mission. We want to change that. We feel a certain sense of urgency that people really are beginning to develop an appreciation and an appetite that needs to be fed, needs to be stimulated, needs to be inspired, and we intend to support that. So this is the beginning of a much more frequent set of offerings that will be podcasts, that will be webcasts, that will be interviews, case studies, a big menu. And we will be rolling that out, taking advantage of the wealth of our international relationships and paying keen attention to cutting edge work from practitioners, from researchers, from authors, from academics, and from the zealots out there who drive this movement. We are going to be using our first two presenters in this new series as exemplars of many aspects of why this works, why this is such an important way of thinking about the power of design. These are two architects. We're starting with architecture, and two people with lived experience of disability from very different parts of the world. And you've seen their bios. We're going to start with Chris Downey, who has a unique experience of being a mid-career architect who lost his sight completely and has told that story all over the world and gotten people very excited about a new way of looking at architecture. And he has taught, he's practicing across the US, and he's going to share a couple of those stories about his practice and about his teaching. Deepak K.C. is a friend since he graduated from architecture school back in Nepal. He is from Kathmandu. He is a person who also has experience with disability, but from birth. So a different experience, and dreamed of an idea of architecture and the practice of architecture as a kid. So different from Chris, and doing very much work that is driven by global priorities in the global South, and particularly for people with disabilities in the global South, work with the UN and the World Bank, and driving an agenda for the global South. This is part of what represents where we want to go. We want to bring people who come from the more privileged parts of the world and people who come from the global South. We want to mix those up to some extent because we want this to be about dialogue. And we want to engage our audience as fully as we can. Everything that we produce will be available in a fully accessible format after the event. We have our terrific Director of Communication, Jess Mendez, who's going to be making sure that we keep communication frequent and steady, and that you'll get information about everything that we're planning and everything that we've done. And I want to acknowledge today that we have our senior producer, PJ Moynihan, who's been working with us for over a decade, solving problems as they arise, doing our documentaries as well as our ordinary delivery of information. And I want to, just before we introduce Chris, who's going to begin, I want to just acknowledge, as we often do, people who have been pioneers in this movement. And Ray Lifshay, a remarkable professor of architecture at the University of California at Berkeley, had a particular way of talking about this vision. And it's the reminder. He had an essay contest that went on for a long time called Architecture is a Social Art. And that is really at the heart of what we're doing. And I'm happy to say that Chris was actually the beneficiary of of Ray as a collaborator and a mentor. So it's very special that Ray be acknowledged up front. So I'm going to turn it over to Chris Downey, who's going to share a set of slides about recent projects and also talk about education, because he is deeply committed.
Hi there. Hi, Valerie. Thanks for the introduction. Can you hear me? Is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay, good. And I'll thanks for that introduction, and it's wonderful to be here with everybody. And if you can give me a moment, I'll do my thing to share the screen and see how that goes. And I think you might be hearing my computer. I apologize for that.
Stop my video. Click tab. Video settings. Tab. Close. Tab. More options. Tab. Question and answer. One tab. Share screen. Note. Tab. Close. Open action. Tab. Share screen. Note space. Tab. Share sound checkbox check. Clear checkmark. Press tab. Select sharing sound mode button. Tab. Optimize for video. Tab. Optimize for video clip. Learn tab. Share screen button. Activate. Press space bar. Tab. Basic tab selected. To switch tab. Sharing option. List box. Use arrow keys to select content. To share semicolon. Press control plus shift plus space to space. Tab. Share sound checkbox check. Tab. Select sharing sound mode button. Menu. Press tab. Optimize for video clip. Tab. Optimize for video clip. Learn more button. Tab. Share screen button. Activate space. Alert to video thumbnails are minimized. Optimize full screen video clip screen sharing. Stop share left parent plus right parent button. Activate. Press space bar. Share preview double lens F5. Stop share left parent alert to started screen share. Press F6 to switch between open Zoom windows.
Okay, by chance did it go to slideshow mode?
Alert live transcription left parent closed captioning right parent.
Or is it sharing my screen at all?
Confirming it's sharing your screen.
Alert participants can now see your
It
screen.
is or you can. Sorry, there's a delay. Can you see the screen?
Yes,
Okay, and is it in slideshow mode?
it is in slideshow mode.
It is. Okay, terrific. Thank you. The joys of not being able to see in a visual world, in a visual format. So let's see. Unfortunately, it's
Tab. Music currently muted. Alt active shift tab. Stop share left parent plus right parent buttons. Activate. Press tab. Expand screen share preview buttons. Activate. Press space bar. Stay alert. Expand screen share preview. Share preview double ND. Tab. Space.
it's not quite working right here. Let me see what's going on.
Tab. Alt tab. Task switching. PowerPoint slideshow. Dash left bracket. IHCD 240,222 left parent final right parent. .ppc right bracket. Ready. Slide 1. IHCD 240,002. Slide 2. Accessible entrance.
Okay.
Slide 1. Slide 1. Washington State
Okay.
School for the Blind. View building from southwest.
Maybe now it's working. First slide's up, and you can hear me, and you can hear the computer.
Slower. Slower. Slower.
I'll take that as a silent yes. So the first project I wanted to talk about is a recent project that just opened up this past year, and it's what is called the Life Skills Training Center, which really it's in Washington State here in the U.S. for the Washington State School for the Blind, and this really it's a two-story building with a two-level program. The first level is what they call LIFT, Learning Independence for Today and Tomorrow. That's for students that are blind in transition age, going from high school, from home, to college, university, technical school, going to work, wherever they're headed to. Well, they don't necessarily have the training skills, the independent living skills that they need to success, for success on their own out in the community. So it's a place to come and live. It's a academic calendar year. There are nine dorm rooms, and it's a place for them to come, have some supervision, some guidance. It's not active teaching, but it's active mentoring, active guidance in terms of just daily tasks, everything from taking care of themselves, cleaning their rooms, cleaning their space, cooking for themselves, shopping for themselves, getting around town, just taking care of all the sort of tasks of life that maybe they didn't get to do while they're at home, and maybe their family was taking care of those things for them. So anyway, it's active living and learning, but more in a passive environment. So that's what's happening on the ground floor, and second floor is more about the state rehabilitation training, giving services, technology training, mobility training, all sorts of things for people to get around independently without sight or with low vision conditions. And that is, the two they're separate programs, but they work together. So the ground floor is the learning independence for today and tomorrow left, and that's really where we're going to focus here. So
Slide 2, accessible entrance.
so on this approach to the entry to the learning independence for today and tomorrow left, that space, there's a number of things that are happening to make that accessible to those that are low vision and blind. Some of it you might be able to see. There's a color contrast in the path that leads to the front door that crosses the sidewalk at the street along the side of the building. So you can see that if you have some sight, a low vision condition, you might be able to see that contrast. And it's also has a textural difference. So if you're relying on a cane, you can feel that contrast. You can feel the difference as you approach, as you're going up the sidewalk, and you feel that change, haptic feedback different from your cane. You then know you're on the path to the front door, and you can turn to go towards it. And the building is actually kind of split at that spot, so it's creating sort of the crack where the entry can be. That can be observed by the staff. There's a staff office just inside, and they can see out to see people approaching as you come in. And so at this point, you just really want to be mindful of sort of the various things that are done to help people with limited to no sight be aware of the environment they're entering and really accessing what's more of a residential feel to the front door.
Slide 3, shared kitchen.
Inside, there's a number of things that's happening, but in the core of the space, there's really sort of the community spaces. And a big part of that community is the kitchen. This is where the students they cook for themselves. That's their responsibility. But they want to learn from each other. They want to share with each other. And it's actually just across a corridor from the staff office, where they have windows looking out into the space across the hallway, and they can see into the kitchen and can offer assistance when needed, have good access. And there are members of the staff that are blind. We have windows, sliding windows that open up from the staff office into that space so they can hear what's going on. If they can't see it, they can still supervise it by being able to hear it by listening out through that, having that space open there. The great thing about hearing as opposed to sight is hearing can turn around corners. Sight can't do that too well. And so those that are blind, they're sort of really keen to hear what's going on and hear what's happening down the hallway, hearing what's happening in the kitchen, and sort of really being able to supervise things, be aware of what's happening there. But the most important thing is for the students to be in there cooking, sharing, learning from each other. The kitchen there are two different kitchen stations. So two can be cooking for themselves at the time. There's large pantries, but everybody has their own areas for their food. And likewise for the refrigerators, storage, for the shared utensils of all the cooking materials, it's all there for them to share. And also a place to sit in front of it, to look back into the kitchen, to share with people there. This kitchen also looks out to a courtyard we'll talk about later. The two different workstations are at different elevations, one at an accessible height in an accessible station, and the other being higher for those that might not be able to bend over and more comfortable working at the standard height. Otherwise, everything's identical.
Slide 4, pleasant acoustical environment.
And this is a dining area just adjacent to the kitchen, where it's a place for them to sit together at more of a shared dinner space, or perhaps a place to do some work, do a project or whatever. But it's in this big social space, all again focused on this idea of community, of sharing, in an acoustic environment that's really tailored to promote good speech intelligibility, for the students to be able to hear each other, to have a good functional environment, and to be pleasant. So they're right next to the kitchen. They don't want it to be too loud and bothered by all the sounds that are happening in the kitchen. So it's just really being mindful of how to control the acoustics within that space while having a very comfortable space. Again, it's looking out to the courtyard to the west, which we'll talk about soon.
Slide 5. Comfortable place for respite.
And then, if I'm not mistaken, this is an image of what they refer to as a living room or free space, place to go play video games, place to hang out, talk with each other, share their experiences from the day, sharing tips, whatever, and really trying to have this space where they can come together in a more relaxed environment to sort of share their experiences. There are many other spaces like all of this around the space, around the buildings.
Slide 6. Access to nature.
But those three spaces, the living room, the dining room, and the kitchen, they all look out to the west to this sort of open space that's a very critical part of the experience. For those going through this, it's a very intense experience of learning all these different skills. The anxieties of being comfortable walking around the community, taking public transit, dealing with your job or with work, with school, and having a place to come back and relax. It's a good environment, but we want to be able to get out there and enjoy it. But also with those community spaces being located next to it, being able to open the doors, open the windows to let the smells of the garden come in, let the smells from someone cooking out on the grill come in, or the laughter, chatter, conversations, whatever else, the sounds of birds, the sound of the wind through the trees, whatever. It's about opening up the building to that space and the communication back and forth and all that sensory experience. There's also a table under a canopy that's a prefabricated canopy that's really great in that it's in Portland, Oregon, and Vancouver, Washington. It rains there a lot, not a lot of hard rain, but a lot of rain. And this canopy opens and closes, so it mechanically opens. If it's sunny and dry, it can be open and enjoy the sun. If it's raining, it automatically closes itself, so the rain isn't coming in on the table, and you can be out there and listen to the rain, enjoy the nice day, but under the cover if it's a drizzly, rainy day. There's also a sound art out there, so that water coming off the roof of the building goes down through this art piece that animates the sound of water as it's in the space, and really trying to connect the people to the nature, but also trying to provide art that's accessible to those that don't see it. That and lots of different options for where to sit, how to sit, being able to move things around, get that to work. The garden for growing spices, herbs, vegetables, whatever, for them to cook themselves, prepare, and be responsible for. So there's a lot happening in that space. And
Slide 7.
finally,
Tunable and dimmable lighting.
on this space is their rooms. It is about their own space as well. And the critical thing, there's a lot of these students have low vision conditions. And what's interesting about that a lot of people do not know, is that within that, the visual environment is incredibly important. And in fact, the visual environment can minimize or maximize their visual acuity at any given time. You don't see the same way in different types of spaces. The light, the glare, the types of colors, all of that affects the effectiveness or the acuity, the actual lived acuity of your sight in that space. A big part of that is lighting. And so giving, like from the principles of universal design, flexibility in space, or the ability to modify it to your own needs. They can dim the lights. That's a common thing these days. But with the new LED lighting technologies, you can also adjust the color of the light, the temperature of the light. So that gives the students the ability in their own space to adjust the color of the light, the temperature of the light, so it's more comfortable for them to really fit their needs.
Slide 8. Wayfinding Inclusivity
So
project.
the next project I wanted to talk about is something totally different. In the same sort of neck of the woods, this is up in Redmond, Washington State. And dawned on me, I have a lot of work up there in that general area, Pacific Northwest. And this is for Microsoft. And this is a prototypical wayfinding project for their campus, their corporate campus. And what was interesting here and I'll just sort of share a few of these images,
Slide 9. Photos of user group testing.
is that Microsoft, they've been keen to hire the best talent they can, however it comes, and also to have diverse talent, so that they hire people with disabilities. They want them to be part of their collaborative work groups. Some of them work on accessibility issues. Some of them work in the mainstream flow of their work, their products, services. And it's important to them that they be included, that they have an equitable experience on the campus. And they had recently it had a new wayfinding program developed, and they quickly realized that they missed a good part of their people that worked there at the company, that it wasn't accessible, that it was a strictly visual system, and they wanted to come up with a more inclusive, more universal wayfinding strategy for the campus. And oddly, they didn't want to rely on technology, and they wanted to really rely on a shared platform of physical signage that could be seen with different types of visual acuities, but also be touched, to have a tactile system to it as well. And for everybody to work off that same system, not to have a system over here for one group or another elsewhere. So it was really important to come up with this tactile and visual system that worked across the broad range of abilities there represented there at the Microsoft campus. And it was important to really test it. They launched that initial wayfinding package without testing it across their demographic. And so this was photographs of full-size mock-ups of the initial. We took a lot of lessons. We got a lot of really good feedback through this user group testing session, modified a lot of the elements to come up with more accessible, more universally appropriate, and more equitable signage for everyone.
Slide 10. Inclusive map and directional indicator mockup. Slide 11. UCB Social Justice and Design Architecture Studio.
Finally, I wanted to close with a few images of some work, not my work, but studio, work with students at UC Berkeley through this wonderful opportunity that was created by Ray Lifshay at UC Berkeley, as mentioned by Valerie Fletcher in the introduction. And it was I was an inaugural recipient of the visiting professor of practice in social justice and design. And it's to be a platform for visiting architects, visiting designers, urban designers, all sorts of different people to come to the school, bringing in structures, ideas, principles of social justice and design, really celebrating and sharing principles of universal design and a more equitable and inclusive environment. And the opportunity was to teach a graduate level architecture studio. And think of that, that's for me as a blind architect to teach a design studio there at UC Berkeley. And it's a phenomenal experience that is so consistent with what Ray Lifshay had taught at the school, where he brought in people from the disability community around Berkeley to serve as clients, as consultants. He would pay them to come and work at the school, to work with him in his undergraduate studios, architecture studios, and the teaching of architecture. And there's a film about it, about those studios. It was called something like to design a home for someone unlike me. And a big part of it is it's at its core very different than the typical way of thinking about architecture. It wasn't about getting deeper into yourself, deeper into your idiosyncrasies. And it was about really getting more in touch with the community around the people that use the space. And in this case, to really make the point, to think about people that use space differently, where the environment actually is incredibly critical to their level of engagement and their independence. And this was back in the early 70s. And it's something they really carry forward and really perpetuated through this endowed visiting professor of practice. So in this first
Slide 12, haptic perception dash handrail.
one of the first project with the studio was for the students to design a handrail, a simple thing, but also how the handrail engaged in the wall and the environment around it. But it was all about how it communicated, what the experience was for the user. And it was for a subway entrance at a stair right in front of the Lighthouse for the Blind and Visually Impaired in San Francisco. But the idea is that this particular entry had a high number of people that are blind using that stairwell. And this was an opportunity to design the handrail to be very unique in a way that could communicate with the students, that could share a sense of care, of design, and communicate not through what it looks like, but what it feels like in the grip of your hand. And it was really sort of designing not, for the hand, for touch, not for the eyes. Although clearly, when you do that, you can also design very well for the visual experience as well. But obviously, if you design strictly for the visual, there's a good chance that it may not work so well for other experiences, and especially the sense of touch. So whether it was like how you accidentally engaged the handrail, or how it fit the grip of your hand, or the materiality, how that felt, and even thinking about the stanchion, the bracket that holds up the handrail. A lot of times, it's not just for people that are blind. Nobody really sees where that bracket is, yet it's seldomly designed to be forgiving to the accidental touch or the hit of the hand as you're grabbing the handrail. So really designing that bracket to welcome that, to anticipate that, to know that it's going to be hit, and to design it in a way that would be more comfortable than hitting a sharp edge and really sort of softening that engagement. So anyway, there's a lot that's happening there, but it's also trying to reduce the architecture to a point that really heightens the intimacy of architecture and thinking about designing for delight in ways that can be experienced other than that of sight.
Slide 13, acoustic impulse response.
The second part of that project was to design a canopy over the stairs to basically craft an acoustic response to someone coming out of the lighthouse, coming out of their front door, wanting to find where the stair is. There's nothing that really guides that. You could put little guide strips in the ground, but there are other ways to do that. And what we wanted to do here was to use the idea of an acoustic response, a feedback response. If you tap your cane on the ground, it goes out in the space, it hits surfaces, comes back, and you can hear where elements are, openings are, whatever, and to really design what the sound that you could hear on approach to that stairwell, and use that to navigate towards the top of the stair. So it's really using this idea of sound and working with those reflective surfaces to create a canopy over the stair, as opposed to just thinking about the canopy to block sun, to block rain or whatever, but maybe use the idea of acoustics to give shape, give form to that canopy.
Slide 14, acoustic impulse response plus.
But then also some of the students took the idea of trying to animate the elements, the experience there. And one thing that happens in a subway station when the subway trains go by, or when there's wind through the windy street, it creates wind that sort of pulls through the stair. So some of the students developed design strategies that celebrated that, whether there were wood chimes overhead, that when the gust of wind would come, it would be like a wave going through the ceiling of wood chimes, or another, it was little metal reflective pieces that would twitter in the wind.
Slide 15, haptic perception and dash underfoot.
But also designing things on the ground plane. being mindful of, can you feel what the approach is to the stair, or different things you could do on the ground surface, so you could feel it underfoot through your footfalls, through haptic feedback through the cane, and really thinking about that ground composition in ways other than just brick everywhere, as most of that street is, that sidewalk is. So.
Slide 16, project 1 final review.
And then this was the final review for that, with the students sharing a lot of model work, a lot of tactile drawings, and the students had the challenge of not only the design itself, but how to share that with a professor that's blind, how they could provide access into their thinking, into their design work, into the spaces, the things that they design. And also for their members of the jury that were brought in that weren't architects. Some were, others weren't, and some were people that were blind, others had different disabilities, and all trying to present, share, and discuss their work with the jury.
Slide 17, project 2: community inclusive boathouse.
And I think I'll stop there in the interest of time, but that's the final project was the design of a community boathouse that was to be an adaptive rowing center, a center that was to be open to the community and not a place sort of set apart on the waterfront, in the urban waterfront, but actually a magnet, a place to really attract the public, everyone to go there, that it's not a rarefied place, that it's an accessible place open to everyone, trying to open the Oakland estuary, to everyone around in the Oakland area. So, and
Slide 18,
finally,
Chris working with students, Virginia Tech blind design workshop.
a very different kind of experience. It's something I'm excited about. I'll be doing this again this April, and it's a blind design workshop that's hosted out of Virginia Tech, Virginia Polytechnical Institute in Blacksburg, Virginia. And it's a program run by a professor that I've known over the years. And he works with his graduate architecture students to teach a week-long course on architecture taught to students, high school students from around Virginia that are blind. And working with them to learn how to design, how to draw, how to build models, and to design. In this case, it was a two-room house for them, and they could pick the site, and over this week period have this introduction to architecture. In this photograph, I'm working with one of the students, and she's presenting her to having a little desk crit, sharing with me the design of her home, which is a really wonderful little design, and it's not only about creating access to the profession for students that are blind. Although this student actually applied to the school there. I'm not sure if she got in. I haven't heard how that all played out. I'll find out soon. But it's also for the students, the graduate architecture students there at Virginia Tech, to have access to a different way of learning, a different way of experiencing architecture, of thinking about architecture, and for them to think about how other people can value architecture, what works and what doesn't, and having a more expansive view of architecture. So with that.
Slide 19, thank you. Control, share preview, double ND, tab. Tab. Alt tab, that's switching, ready.
Chris,
Slide 19.
Yes.
thank you. I know I'm not alone in scribbling notes from that presentation. I have to say, I'm particularly thrilled, and I think we're going to have to put this somewhere on the wall. You said, in talking about the handrail, heighten the intimacy of architecture to deliver a sense of delight. Brilliant, just wonderful. So now we are going to make a shift to go to another part of the world and very different kinds of projects, to Deepak K.C. And Deepak is with me here at IHCD's headquarters. And we will do both a slideshow for Deepak that he's prepared, but also we're going to share a story on YouTube video about a remarkable project throughout Nepal to get young people with disabilities to become serious ping pong players. So that will be the final piece for presentation. So I'm going to shift to Deepak now.
Okay, nice. Okay, nice. Okay. Flip. Okay. Uh, yeah. Thank you, Valerie, for your wonderful.
Is he audible now?
Yeah, just give me 1 second.
Okay.
Thank you, Valerie, for your wonderful interaction. Hello, everyone. First, thank you for your kind interactions. Whether it is morning, afternoon, or evening, I'm hearing my own voices. Is it
He can
not?
hear his own voice, Peter.
Yes.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
If he doesn't want to, he can give you the
Okay. For those who cannot see me, I'm a 46-year-old person with bald hair, brown skin, and sitting in wheelchairs, and originally from Nepal. Today, I'm wearing the white T-shirts and speaking from the IHCD the headquarters. I'm studying the urban planning as a research fellow in MIT. The project I'm sharing with you today is about the accessible toilet, and it was initiated by me and implemented by me. It was initiated and implemented under my leadership. So, in the urban area of Nepal, the issue of the public toilet is a very significant. We have a shortage of sufficient toilet, and even the existing are poorly maintained and inaccessible to everyone. And particularly, the toilet particularly are totally inaccessible to us. And to tell you the truth, in my entire life, even in my, the graduations, graduation of the architectural degree, I could not see and use the accessible toilets. So it was the very big issue for me. Whenever I go and whenever I go, I used to share this story to everyone. So at one moment, I was invited to attend the Universal Design Seminar in the Saudi Arabia, and I shared the same bitter experience there. And hearing my speeches, the Asian Regional Council's president's architect Joseph Kwan approaches me and proposes me what I can do to improve the situation. And as at that time, the council meeting was going to be held in Nepal, and so we plan to organize the first Universal Design Seminar and the design competition. And the design competitions was targeted for both professional architect as well as the students. The proposal was to sensitize the issues and to promote the universal design concept. And after that, we decided to organize the universal designs the seminar first time in Nepal, and also organize the design competition. Both the conference and design competition was immensely successful with more than 200 participants. While we introduced the concept, we have the design. After competition, the design we had the designs, but we do not have the have the strategy to implement it.
Troubleshooting.
So,
So we're trying to get the slides back.
mm. Mm. Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, the winning design competition was chosen for the implementation. The next slide. And as we have the designs, I mean, but we had a lot of challenges and like the lack of suitable lands to implement that project, and we do not have the specific, I mean, the daily operation model of the project, and the land and the lack of funding was another big issue. Next, please. So in order to tackle this the issue, we adopted a different kind of the strategy. To solve the issue of the land, we collaborate with the local municipality, because nobody wants to see the public toilet in their surroundings. So it was one of the very big challenges for us. And because of the good coordinations with the municipality, the mayor and allow us a very big, I mean, the big and good spot to implement that project. And after that, as we do not have a good kind of, I mean, the operational framework, so we, in order to tackle these issues, we approaches with a local NGO. The NGO supported us to frame a very good framework for the daily operations. And as we do not have the good practice of operating the public toilet, so we have to add some design features in the designs. So we decided to add a biogas extractions, and which could be used for the small cafe. And there was also the big issue of the running water in our particular in our urban context. So in order to deal that issues, we add a raining water harvesting system in our designs. Next, please. So here are some design features. I mean, in terms of design features, the entire setup and the space are carefully designed with a modern equipment to ensure the accessibility for everyone. Next, please. You can see the pictures. And from the extraction of the biogas and the extraction of the gas, what was possible through the collaboration with the local NGOs, and with the use of this biogas, the biogas was used to prepare the hot tea and coffee, which was a part of, I mean, which helped to, I mean, generate a small fund to run the project for the long term. And the additional, next please, and additional facilities such as the sanitary pad, vending machines, breastfeeding space and a baby diaper changing area have also been added. All these features may sound very common to the developed country like the US, but this kind of the facility in the country like Nepal, where there was not even a single accessible toilet, it was a revolutionary project for us. And now, and because of this project, this project was a very, highlighted and appreciated by the local government and the media. It also covered a large media coverage in my country. Although these projects, took a significant period to implement, but after implementing, it has a very big impact, and it shows how our public toilets should be look like in the future, especially in the country like Nepal. Next, please. So in a conclusion, the project impact, it has helped to change the perceptions of the public toilet. Before it was, its designs, the hygiene, and the accessibility. It has covered all the aspect how the universally accessible toilet should looks like, and it has helped to change the perception of the people about the public toilet. And due to the design, because of the design competition, the people got an opportunity to know about the concept of the universal design. Before that, the people, even the architectural issues, the topics of the universal design was not much, the thought in our architectural issues. And because of this project, and this kind of the project was also implicated in other two big city in Nepal. So, because of this project, they also started the similar kind of the project. So after at last, having making this kind of few project, we cannot solve a much, but after this project, we set a kind of the example in a society and teach my community about the the serious issues of the accessible toilets. Thank you. This is all about me. I'm sorry for my, the poor English language skills. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepak. We are very grateful. Your English skills are far better than my Nepalese skills. And we're grateful to hear it. I think you remind us of how thoroughly we forget the dominant experience of so many people in the world that can destroy opportunity and a sense of self and a sense of being part of the community. So we are now going to move on to the ping pong story. So Deepak has invested a lot of time and energy in transforming what people understand about a good system that marries, I think very importantly, marries inclusive design and environmental sustainability. You just can't do it without that combination. And on the ping pong side, I think it needs to be acknowledged before people see this, that you are a passionate zealot of ping pong and quite a serious player. And I think people know that it's actually it's an Olympic sport.
Yeah. Olympic and Paralympic
which can often be
sports.
forgotten.
And actually, the good things about the ping pong is that even the Paralympian can participate in Olympics.
It's combined.
It is
Olympics
combined.
and Paralympics are the same. Really important tidbit of information there. PJ, are we ready to roll on the video?
Yep, one moment, please.
All right, PJ, be with us in a second. And Chris and Deepak will be staying with us once we wrap up the presentation portion, and we will be welcoming your questions on chat. I'll do the moderation for both Deepak and Chris to respond to your questions. And one of the things, just to, before we get to the video, both you and Chris have derived a great deal of opportunity via the attention of media. We're all very proud that Chris is a guy who's been interviewed on 60 Minutes in the United States, but also on the BBC. And that you have had the attention of media on a big story that allowed other people to say, wait a minute, how can I help? What can I do? So I think it's a really important part of these two stories. Are we good, PJ? We're good. PJ is going to run the, this is a YouTube video about the Ping Pong project.
If you're a web designer,
it was amazing. Nepal has been an amazing experience for me coming to this country. It's the first time and experiencing their culture and how amazing the people are that live here. And for me, it's been great to see everyone united after such a tragedy. My feeling getting to play in such an area of Nepal, especially after the quake, was really amazing, and to play on a table outside with Nepalian para players and national team able-bodied players was amazing, and the crowd that came to watch was really good, and it was exciting to have so many people here and spread the love of how amazing table tennis is.
Table Tennis for Nepal is a project from the ITTF together with the United Nations to promote the practice of table tennis for people with a disability. We will provide table tennis classes for children with a disability during 3 years in 6 different venues all over Nepal.
We're also helping to rebuild some of the table tennis centres after the earthquake. In one in particular in Kathmandu, the architect and the designer of the rebuild is a gentleman in a wheelchair by the name of Deepak K.C, who is also the president of the Nepalese Disabled Table Tennis Association. So this is a great example of one sport, one family, which ITTF is pushing to include worldwide.
Everyone shouting ping
I've been walking on the railroad all the livelong day. My name is Nikesh. I'm 12 years old. I live at SS Children Village and I like table tennis very much. I'll play sometimes table tennis, yeah, and sometimes playing computers. Oh, nice shot!
My name is Milan Paudel. I live in SOS. 10 or 11 years I've been to living here, and I have no mother, no brother. My life is table tennis, and my aim is to be singer. I'll be best singer in the world. Can you hear the captain shouting? Dinah, blow your horns. Dinah wants to blow, Dinah wants to blow, Dinah wants to blow your horn. Thank you.
For this the project, my government, the Korean government, has supported $120,000 for this project. And also ITTF also funded this one, and the UNOSDP provided technical services. Unfortunately, last year there was an earthquake, and this facility was damaged very much. And then finally, we have today celebrating the opening of these facilities. And our real project called NepALL project is being launched today.
Table tennis for Nepal is very important due to the fact that we can use sport as a tool for development and peace also in this country. We have to see all over the world that we integrate and not isolate people with a disability. And in table tennis, you can do it in a wonderful way. This is something what I really like to do, grassroots things that supports people working in sports and respect each other through sport, become friends through sport. If with or without a disability, it doesn't matter.
For me, I play table tennis at a competitive level, so I'm competing at the Olympics and the Paralympics, but I also remember when I first began, it was all about the fun and enjoyment I had, and it was great to see that here in Nepal, that's still alive.
It's my personal hope that this program will lead to greater integration of disabled people within the Nepalese society, but also serve as a model for other countries worldwide to do similar programs.
We also want that the society see the people with disability in a different way, that in many cases they were staying at home, and through sport they will show that they can also do the same things, probably in a different way, but they can practice sport and they can have a normal life like anyone.
So, how old are you?
I'm 12 years old.
12?
Yes.
12, and you?
And you?
I'm, what do you think?
I think 100.
100!
I think
40.
no, 50.
50, okay, 50 is okay. 54.
Yeah, no.
So you say 100. That's not okay.
It's your turn. And we have some starting questions on chat, and I'm going to moderate. At least I hope we have some starting questions. We have some comments. Let me see if we have questions. There are a lot of comments. I'm looking for questions. Let me invite them then.
Valerie, do you see the Q&A screen? We have 9 questions queued.
Jess, I'm seeing comments more than questions. Perhaps I'm missing something. Oh, sorry, I've got the Q&A. Sorry. I've got.
Zoom webinar share screen. Hold buttons activate with spacebar.
The slides will be shared after the presentation. They will be fully transcribed and an accessible version will be up as soon as possible.
Close buttons activate. Close the next start your video. Start my video buttons activate with space. Zoom webinar share screen. Hold buttons activate. Shift tab.
So we've had 2 questions about that.
Shift tab. Video settings button. Shift tab. Stop my video. Hold buttons. Shift tab. Audio settings button. Menu. Shift tab. Music currently unmuted. Hold buttons activate with.
Be surprised if there were no questions. That's never happened before.
No, there's questions. You're not a panelist now. You're promoting panelist now.
Promoting to panelists. PJ?
Now you should be able to see the Q&A.
Yeah. Ah, there it is. What is the principal problem to get interest, engagement, and continuity in this type of initiative? That looks like it could go to either one of you. Chris, since Deepak has just been talking, do you want to field that first? So what is the principal problem to get interest, engagement, and continuity for this kind of initiative.
Close to that music on your video.
Is my video up?
We can hear you and we can't see you at the moment.
Tab, close button, tab, close to that music, tab, start my video button, activate space. Zoom, close to that music, start your video.
Now we can see you
Okay,
and we can
all
hear
right.
you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I think that's it's so important. I think in the space I work in reaching students, architecture students, landscape students, urban designers, planners, you name it. When students, I think at least in the US today, there's a great passion, I think around the world, there's a great passion for social justice and connecting the idea of the justice of the environment to the work that we do, that we as designers of the built environment aren't passive in this, and that there's a lot of people, most young architects today want to do that, want to design in a more appropriate way, a more inclusive way, and to imagine a more inclusive and culture and world around us. So, and the schools need to teach that, need to answer that question and to address that passion. So getting into the schools, sharing it there where it can be learned and appreciated and embraced, it just becomes the nature of how you do things as opposed to a different way of thinking. It's the way of thinking, and it's really tied to the idea of the social justice. So to me, that's sort of the critical thing, and why I'm really passionate about teaching, being around young architecture students and practitioners.
If I might just interject, one of the realities that we encounter now with increasing frequency in our consulting and design services work and in our research, we're finding clients are well ahead of the design professions because they want to be cutting edge. They want to actually ask the questions, who are you designing for? And get design that will actually make a difference in their environment in terms of people's satisfaction, people's performance levels. The clients are ahead of us on this. We got to catch up with the client. Let me also pass the question about what makes the difference to Deepak, because I think that's a question equally for both of you, very different parts of the world. But again, it's what's the principal problem? How do you get people to pay attention?
How do you?
How do you get people to pay attention?
I mean, I couldn't understand. How
do you get people to pay attention? How do you keep doing this?
Okay. Because I mean, I believe in also social justice. I mean, if I have a kind of experience and I know the issues. If I do not initiate it, and if I do not teach the society and the people, then it will be hard for us and to raise this issue. So whenever the opportunity allowed, I try to share my story and to try to change the system from my capacity. That is the real motivation behind involving.
Thank you, Deepak. And we've got a question for Chris. From one of our respected clients in a museum in Washington. And she wants to hear more about that Microsoft project of wayfinding. Can you give a little more detail, Chris? Because it's such an interesting story of they went down this road and found out that it didn't really work, but made a commitment to figuring out what could make it work. Could you tell a little more story about that? Give us a little more detail.
Okay. It's interesting in that it's a prototype in that they're actually rolling it out and evolving it. It's a dynamic thing. It's a learning thing that they want to. It's never a thought to be something that they're going to hit just right. at the first moment, the first attempt. But it's really thinking of, at all times a sort of a multimodal approach to how that information can be accessed. So there are, if I can recall, a number of primary elements. There's a map kiosk, there's a directional post, and then there's I'll focus on those two. That's what it's been a while. Those are the two that's coming to mind. And the map kiosk is really to be something that you could touch, you can see. It's on an angle so that it's a more comfortable approach. Can't be flat in the exterior environment, because then it would just collect debris, you know, all sorts of stuff. People set things on it, so it's on an angle, which is more. It's easier to understand if you're blind. It's hard to understand a map in a vertical plane. It needs to be rotated at or near the ground plane, and then to always maintain orientation to how you approach the map so that it's properly configured in the environment in terms of cardinal directions. So in thinking about it, it's sort of like the primary elements, the various buildings in that particular block, and then how to share it. So there's Braille, there's raised letters, there's visual letters, there's visual lines. That includes pedestrian paths, bike paths, all the different features in that particular block. But that in the directional post, which is just a post at the sign at the side of an intersection, that regardless of how you approach it, if you can see the numbers of the buildings and their arrows, and you can see it or you can feel it. The issue is, like, if you trying to come up with a system, how you would know there's a signpost like that. So if you're blind, you could just go right by it and never know. So with the benefit of being on a campus where they can establish a pattern language, then, you know, is there something they could do in the ground plane that goes across the entire path that would articulate the presence of the signpost at the side of the intersection? So that's all those things sort of point up a number of things of designing that kind of surface that's going to be harmonious and work across all disabilities, but doesn't rattle, doesn't rumble too much if you're in a wheelchair, especially if you have spinal cord injuries, doesn't trip you. But it's something that's perceptible and reliably perceptible as a landmark for someone who can't see, to engage that and to know they have access to the signpost at the side. An interesting thing with the tactile arrows, the power of user group testing is the initial model had, in the prototype, had arrows that would point up for straight ahead. As some of the blind employees there at Microsoft, this is at Microsoft, they're working in Microsoft, they felt that signpost and thought it communicated that there was an elevator ahead, that they were to be looking for an elevator to go to that particular building. And it made us realize that there's a visual language that's associated with arrows that doesn't necessarily translate when you don't have that visual experience. With the benefit of 4 posts, you could always have a face available to you to point horizontally in the right direction. And you could see it on the side facing you. If you can't see, you can reach around to the other side and feel the arrows, and you could read the Braille and the raised set characters that way. So there was a number of things that was all about sort of coming up with a system that would work, but also so that it would be accessible. It doesn't work if you don't know it's there. So the same system was used in the ground plane for identifying the presence of a map kiosk. So anyway, that's sort of the range of things. I hope that it's all part of the system. You know, there are other things that happen with that wayfinding on campus.
And system is probably the most important word there. Thank you, Chris. We have a question that it speaks to a very practical issue. How do you recruit ordinary people to test designs to offer their perspective? So, I'm actually going to answer that one, partly because it's something that we do every few days, at least every week. Our research is really centered on real people and real environments, whether those are physical or digital. And in our experience, there's two things that matter. One is a clear communication of respect, that you respect people's time and expertise, and they're compensated for that time, whether with a gift certificate or a little bit of money. You've got to indicate to people that you're not just taking advantage of them. The second piece is just as important. They have to feel that their time and contribution of ideas has meaning, that this actually makes a difference. It makes a difference in what happens. And that is central in our minds to the notion of engaging people we refer to as user experts. I hope that helps. And then there's a question again from a colleague who is also a practitioner and a professor. And she wants to know, what tools and softwares do you use for designs that are accessible? She teaches blind and low vision students and has a hard time finding methods that are accessible to them to learn design and design software, or design versus software. Thoughts on that, Chris?
Yes, that's a challenging question, an issue, because there's the interface for drawing in the computer is dependent on being able to see the screen. Or in what I do, since I have no sight at all, is I have to print the drawings in tactile form to be able to review the drawings, to read it, to be part of that design process. But I can't, there's currently no software, no interface. It's not just a software interface, a software issue, it's a hardware issue as well, of having an accessible display and input device that would provide a tactile way of drawing. You can't feel an electron on the screen. Anyway, there's hardware systems that are being developed that could address this. They're making good progress, but it's years away and many thousands of dollars outside, beyond my reach to be able to access that. So to me, there's those with low vision conditions. There are, working with the type of modifications they need for the type of screen, the size of screen, the things to do that you can work with. There are many of the software programs can be accessible. I know of low vision architects and students that have success in working with them, whether that's Revit programs on Apple, various programs. So, but being that I have no ability to drive design through the computer, I stick to more analog systems of drawing with wax sticks on embossed drawings, and then relying on others to translate the tactile work that they can see in visual form, but also access in tactile form, to then draw it up for then in the computer for me to then test it. So I sort of work outside of the normal way of thinking about the production of architecture, and I don't do sort of the typical production of architecture. I really try to deliver the unique value on projects that really would benefit from that insight, that knowledge is within the design process, and really work as a collaborator. So when we do all sorts of physical model building with these programs for the blind high school students, they do wax stick sketches and drawings. Again, they'll work with other students, sighted architecture students that can draw up the sketches they're developing, and they work collaboratively together that way. So it's still a challenge out there for the tools to be fully accessible.
Thank you, Chris. I am reminded of one of the aspects that is at the opposite end, which is how do you get people to understand a proposed design or plan when it is time for community engagement? And one of the things we've learned by a commitment to make sure that that process involves people who are often not present, people with lived experience of a physical, sensory, or brain-based disability, older people who aren't the dominant people at the table. And the usual methods of sharing a project or a plan don't work very well. We've actually found tremendous impact of three-dimensional tactile models, much more readily available today because of 3D printing. And it isn't just people who need that. It's pretty much everybody who's too embarrassed to admit they can't follow what you're talking about or read a plan. You know, tactile is a precious means of community engagement. So I strongly recommend that. Thanks, Chris. And somebody has asked about just materials. So part of the commitment that IHCD is making in our expanded educational mission is to provide extensive global resources. They're essentially all in English, but we are working on a new website. It's not quite ready to launch, but when it is, we will have a very extensive set of resources of all kinds. That will include links to organizations, but it will also include books, materials, and hopefully good teaching tools. We do a lot of teaching ourselves, and we know that it is not easy to find. We will also share something that I'm very excited about, which is increasingly valuable guidance, formal guidance, some of it expressed as standards elsewhere in the world, looking at populations that we don't actually have any standards for. Thinking about, for instance, people with brain-based reasons for disability. And we will be sharing all of that and providing that guidance. So thanks for the push on that. It's a motivation to make sure to get that wrapped up. And our old friend, Karen Breitmeyer, an architect with a disability in Seattle. How do we support young people with disabilities in the quest to be in the design professions? And Karen, you were one of the designers with disabilities in our original copy of Designers Building a World Fit for People, Designers with Disabilities at Work. We thank you for that commitment. And we are working on the second edition of that and extending invitations right now to designers with disabilities, which we hope will be an inspiration to kids. I do think that you're absolutely right that this is something that has to be brought not just to design school. You know, a lot of the people that we're engaging all the time or knocking on the door are young designers who are passionate about social equity. They're talking about justice and the role of design. And they're in many cases fairly elite students. Bringing the idea of changing the world through design is something that I think high school kids need to hear about, who've never met a designer, a professional designer. And I think getting to high school kids is absolutely critical. Chris was talking about that terrific Virginia Commonwealth program that actually is for high school kids, and bringing it to a level of something everybody understands, designing a house. Chris, do you want to comment on that?
I'm sorry, I lost track of where
it's the high school program, the 1 week high school program at Virginia Commonwealth.
I was just trying to get exactly what the question was about that. But in terms of accessing it, it actually came from a national program. The first iteration of it was through the National Federation of the Blind Youth Slam. I think it was in 2010, and I was a mentor for that. And this professor at Virginia Tech was a graduate student instructor with the School of Architecture at the University of Maryland, where it was hosted before. So that was a program for high school students around the US. There was another one that I participated in back in 2019 at the Bartlett School of Architecture in London. That was through a group, Disordinary Architecture, and in conjunction with Bartlett School of Architecture. And what was interesting there was that the dean was particularly interested in not necessarily just how to make the program accessible to students that were blind and visually impaired, but he was concerned about what they had been missing as an institution, as an academic institution, by virtue of the fact that they'd never had a student that was blind or visually impaired. So he wanted the school to learn from that. He wanted to realize that it's not just about access to doing it, but it's what do they have access to as a academic community to different ways of experiencing the environment around them and wanting to bring that into their program.
I want to ask Deepak about his experience living in America. He's on a fellowship right now. He's at the MIT School of Urban Planning and Design. He spends part of his time with us, but you are a presence at MIT. What difference do you make to the students at MIT? They talk to you about your experience?
Yeah, it is a wonderful experience. I mean, being here in MIT too. But I mean, but what I found, the level of our awareness about the accessibility when the student is little bit below than my expectations, and even the college environment is not as I expected, because from the day one I deal so many issues regarding the wayfinding system, access to the building, and so much confusing, to be honest. But my expectation was a little bit higher. MIT, I had expected that the people will be more aware, sensitive, and the design would be the world class. But I will say, even my apartment, where I was, I mean, it was supposed to be the ADA compliances, was not. There was not even the grab bar in my toilet. So I must say that
we have a great deal of work to do, and I think that your surprise is in many ways an affirmation of that even here in an elite institution in the United States, we've got a lot of work to do. Let me go on. And what is the name of the Microsoft facility where Chris helped with the design? Are there highlights of the work on their website? Good question. Have they made it a public story?
Generally speaking, these things aren't public. I got anxious because part of the client team, the client rep for that project was on the call on the virtual session. And maybe if you could better speak to that, but it's a software companies are it's interesting, as Valerie says, they're sort of leading the edge. They're pushing. I find that the technology companies are really pushing architects to do better, to create better access, to go beyond code at a time when most architects are still trying to figure out code. And as Deepak just said, our environment's not up to our own standards. So it would be wonderful to be able to share it more broadly, for them to, I think, to publish it, because it's a wonderful study, rich study in the whole process and all the elements that went into making it happen. But it's sort of well beyond my pay grade and my level of involvement on that.
Chris, I think you make a really important point, though, because I think we really need the nitty-gritty of the detail of real projects that have been completed. And there are clients out there. I mean, if we didn't have NDAs for almost anything we touch, we'd be telling a lot more stories, but we are constrained by that. And I think it is incumbent on all of us to convince clients that those are critical case studies. It builds an awareness and a knowledge that we can go beyond the next time. But if we never tell the stories, it doesn't happen. So I think that has to be a campaign that we all really need to do. And I'm going to go on to another blind colleague who has a point here. Jeannie Fairley is the ADA coordinator for the city of Newton, very near to Boston, and somebody who has taught us a lot about tactile experience in big public projects. So Jeannie is asking, just get to it, what hardware does Chris use? She wants to know about those print plans with raised lines so that he can actually tactily read the plan. So can you talk about those printers, Chris?
The printers, they're embossing printers. There are lots of different types. The printers that I work with are large format. Unfortunately, they're getting smaller and smaller over time. My first one could print on rolls. It was called the Tiger Pro, View Plus Tiger Pro, and it could print on a 16-inch wide roll of paper. And I have drawings that are 200 inches long by 16 inches wide. Fabulous drawings of really major projects. So that kind of embossing printer, what I'm typically printed on are 13 inches by 18 inches from the same company. That one's been discontinued as well. So typically the standard size is about 11 by 17, but there are some large format processes that are really good for public presentations and public projects where you need engagement, community engagement, and that's the UV printers, which is a fairly standard high-end printer used in most reprographic companies, and it typically it cures the ink, but typically it's just 1 or 2 passes of ink. There is something that the architects for the project at the Washington State School for the Blind, the LIFT project, they worked with a local vendor on their UV printer, and it was just, there's a protocol for running, it's like 16 to 24 passes of ink, and it's UV cured. And with that, you end up with a tactile drawing, and they were also able to do Braille. So what's exciting, it's this large format. You can go 24 by 36, 30 by 42. It takes a while to print. Not everybody knows how to do it, but they typically have those machines that can do it. They just have to crack open the user manual and figure out how to do it.
Thank you, Chris. We've got a couple of people who have offered some resources and offered we've got a link. Everybody can see the chat. See Davida Bagatelle, Extraordinaire Design Studio is a game-based kit for teaching students of all ages, universal design. Take a peek at that. Sarah Coppola has actually offered her own contact information. She's teaching inclusive design in an engineering program. Happy to share her resources and syllabi. So please see scoppola@uw.edu. And Karen Breitmeyer reports that Microsoft is releasing their current facility design guide on March 7th as a part of their Ability Summit. So thank you all. That's very generous to share that, and I hope people have caught it. We will make sure to capture the chat so that we can also share these links when we share the transcribed accessible version of today's event. And I think we are probably at the end. Either of our wonderful guests have a final comment? Chris? Deepak?
Yes.
I'll let Deepak go the first time this time.
I mean, thank you. I mean, I really enjoyed the conversation. This is my first experience, but I mean still having the issue while speaking and listening. It is very well for me. Thank you very much.
We have extensive new technology, and we're still getting used to it.
Thank you. This is my first and really a great experience.
Well, it won't be your last.
Thank you.
Chris.
And I think this juxtaposition of the different experiences of disability in different cultures and different economic conditions, different lived experiences, it's a really rich dialogue. I wish we had more time to really have play out more of that dialogue together with Deepak. But there's, yeah, it all points back to that conundrum of the title of universal design, that it's not universal all around the world. You know, there's different cultural interpretations, there are different economic conditions, there are different lifestyles, but this idea of this commitment towards designing that a socially just environment that welcomes everyone in, that engages and empowers everyone equally. And I think like the point I always like to leave is this idea of, for us as architects and designers of whatever stripe, is that the work we do, the ideas that we have, and the way we articulate them and share them and realize them, that we're not passive actors in the environment. What we do really affects the lives of others. So you talk about the power of design. It's an awesome and daunting power to really take that seriously and to realize that the work we do and the way we think about it really does make a tremendous difference. And hopefully, you know, the day won't be too much longer where Deepak won't be disappointed when he comes to visit.
We surely hope that's true, Chris.
The legacy, the world is like, we could only catch up, do the current things right, but catching up with the legacy environment, there's a lot of fixing that needs to be done, and it's a huge lift.
If I might just interject a point here that no one has pointed to specifically, but we have been throughout this conversation using two terms to talk about something that we see, I think, as extremely similar, if not identical, and that is universal design and inclusive design. And I want to just take a minute as we wrap up today, that we were originally called Adaptive Environments. We were one of the 5 organizations at the table in 1997 when the principles of universal design were first created. We were the primary hosts of the first conference, the International Conference in New York and with the UN in 1998, which was really about universal design. Over the course of time and paying attention in the world, we have recognized that diversity of ability, age, culture, race, gender, and religion are really all part of the same vision, the same story. And part of what we were frustrated by in our work in universal design is that for many people, it was no more than the froth on the coffee of accessibility. We see it as certainly building on a floor of accessibility, but it is so much more than froth. There is so much that we have yet to do. There's so much richness, and we have got to figure out how to begin to design the context for human life that is responsive to the real people of the world, and to recognize that a self-identification as a person with a disability is not going to happen for many people. And that's not going to happen for many people who are absolutely in that life experience. But identity is not the way they look at it as in relation to disability. We need to be very respectful of that. So we're doing our best. We're borrowing the language that our English colleagues have used from the get-go of inclusive design. And we believe it communicates a sense that this is open-ended and we learn every day. So thank you for joining us today for today's learning. And we look forward to continuing this conversation with you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Deepak.
Thank you. Thank you.